Hey everyone, I am here with Troy Howell today from Nova Home Loans, and he is going to chat with me about something really interesting. It's a tool that, did you develop this, Troy, or you found
No,
it?
I subscribe to it. It's through
Okay.
Gary Habib, so
Yeah,
kind of a nationally known guy.
it's a super interesting tool that looks at the cost of waiting to purchase with certain assumptions that the interest rates will go down. So I wanted to have Troy on so that we could kind of discuss this and kind of go into detail. It's just one other, tool to analyze. So Troy, thanks so much
Definitely
for
something to think about.
for
Yeah,
coming in.
you
Yeah,
bet. Thanks for having me, Jenny. I really, really appreciate your time.
absolutely. So can you describe this tool a little bit, and we'll kind of go into a sample of property, and we'll just kind of talk about some of the circumstances that somebody might find this to be useful.
Yes, absolutely. Something definitely to consider. So, what I've got up here on the screen is a cost of waiting scenario set up for El Paso County, Colorado. So, it's relevant to your area and your neck of the woods there, Jenny, based on a $450,000 home purchase price. And so what we're doing here, and I'll kind of run my cursor around here a little bit, that's in purple, we can follow. But the loan today, buying at 450, based on reasonable interest rate today, around 7%. And what that looks like over the course of 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. So it's kind of projecting out what things will look like in the future. And what it's taken into consideration is, okay, rates get a little bit better. Say in 6 months, they're 6.5. And in a year, they're 6%. Maybe they're better. Maybe they're not as good as that. And then going from there, but also taking into account El Paso County's history of appreciation. So in here for 6 months, it's showing it should roughly appreciate 3% ish. And that's not just us guesstimating, that's just based on past history and data. So we can adjust that. You can adjust that and say, okay, maybe it's a little bit less than that. Maybe it's a little bit more, but at least it gives us a reasonable ballpark idea of what the potential appreciation is. And that's kind of a key component to this analysis is that in the past, homes appreciate, right? There's been issues, but those were unique. But by and large, homes are always going to be appreciating at some degree. It varies a little bit as to what they appreciate, but this takes that into account with history and data. That's not just willy nilly us throwing a number in there.
Yeah, I'd almost be curious to see if it did have more of a static appreciation component to it, just because that would kind of take that out of the equation. I'd be super curious to see how that changes, because even when there's low to no appreciation, there's still benefits that
Yeah,
somebody who purchases real estate acquires over time, and that's principal pay down, for the topics of this discussion. So yeah, I'd be
right.
really curious to see what that would look like. I definitely, agree that we've had a lot of appreciation in the past. I think we are starting to see it really level out this current year.
Mhm.
But with the assumption of that rate going down, I think the
Yep.
natural assumption is that the prices will go back up. So,
And that's the
I'd be
key thing.
curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's the key, Jenny, that you and I were chatting about earlier too, is that there's a lot of people on the sidelines for buying homes right now because of these lower interest rates they received back in 2020 and 2021. So it's causing a bind on the real estate market. There's not enough homes on the market because these people don't want to sell their homes because of their great rates, which makes sense. And I've had a lot of
Yeah.
clients that are in that boat. They don't want to pay 2.5 times more on the interest rate to buy another house, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
it just kind of kills it. So we have a supply demand issue. We don't have enough supply of homes on the market, and the demand is still pretty reasonable even with these elevated interest rates. Now, we're in that time of year where there tends to be a little bit of a lull, but and on top of the inventory, we're still seeing homes sell and still seeing things happen. If they're priced well, they show well, they're getting sold. And I think there's a great opportunity out there to be had. And I think for the future, we're going to see more demand come in, especially if we see some relaxed interest rates. And over the last 3 weeks, we've been seeing interest rates improve. They've probably come down more than 0.5% in the last 2 to 3 weeks, which is
That's
awesome.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the fire. And so some of the folks that were a little bit on the sidelines are going to start jumping in there. And I think even more so as we get into the traditional spring buying season, around that April timeframe, there's going to be, or I think we're going to start seeing multiple offers, honestly, coming in on some of these properties, especially again, if they're priced well and they show well, you're going to see multiple. So anyway, back to kind of anything you can think of on that. Do you kind of agree with my thought?
Yeah, I've given up trying to make predictions as to what's going to happen. So I have no idea. That I think that's great news that you mentioned that rates are going to come down. I hope that they do. I hope, because I think everyone has kind of that recency recency effect in their memory of just, oh, well, this is a deal if it came down 0.5%,
Right.
So I think that's good news for buyers.
Yeah. I think it's definitely is great news and can definitely change somebody's buying power, which is a whole nother topic for another day.
Yeah. So let's go into the specifics of your tool. And I kind of wanted to highlight before we dive into it that this is not meant to be like a FOMO type of presentation. This is more so if you as an individual investor are financially ready and you've found a good property that fits your long-term buy box, then this is the next step that you need to take to analyze it. This is not, like I said, this is not a FOMO, like, oh goodness, if you're not ready today, but you got to buy. That's not what we're saying here. I just wanted to put that as a blanket statement out there. So assuming that you are, buttoned up financially and you found that perfect property, let's kind of dive into, these assumptions.
Yep, I agree. Thank you for that, Jenny. I think that's spot on for the folks out there. So projecting some appreciation with the property, again, we can dial that back, and we'll show a little bit later in the chart. Even if you have some of these numbers, there's still a lot to be gained.
Yeah.
And without getting really into the nitty gritty, I think sliding to the property appreciation, again, we can level that out. Payments over time, you might see a little bit of a dip down initially with that rate drop, but then you'll see the payment over time going up because the price of the property is going up. So I think a misconception for a lot of people out there is like, hey, if I can shave off 0.5% off the rate, it's going to just make a world of difference. But if you're taking 0.5 off the rate, but you're paying $20,000 more for the house, or $25,000 more to the house, it may have completely negated, if not made it worse, right? So you're financing, another $20,000, $25,000 at a lower rate doesn't overcome the appreciation. And to me, this is the meat of this analysis is this little slide here. So the payment differential and what it makes on an annual basis. So in this example, $48 a month, $580 over the 6 months. Then you go out over a year, it's annualized, it's $1,300. And then all of a sudden now you flip over a little bit, even with that better rate, you're going to have a slightly heavier payment, and even more so at 3 years.
So is this saying that if I were to buy that property today at the 7% and then it goes down to 6.5% in 6 months, the difference between the price today, the rate today, the price then, the rate then, I am out about $580.
Yep. Your savings is $580.
Okay.
Woohoo. But if you take into account the appreciation and then amortization, which is your monthly payments that you'll have made, paying down the balance on the loan, right? Mm-hmm. You gain some equity through amortization, you're paying down the loan, you'll have missed out on $16,000 of gain there. So even if we kind of, to your point, Jenny, earlier on, if you take that 3% and change appreciation and cut that in half, let's just call that $7,000 plus the $2,000 in amortization. Now all of a sudden you're out 10 grand, right? Between appreciation and amortization. So wealth building. So was it worth the $580 savings for that better rate, slightly higher price to lose out on the $10,000 in amortization pay down and doing the appreciation on that property? So
yeah.
yeah.
Can we actually talk about the amortization piece? Because this is something that I find super interesting. And I think a lot of people maybe aren't aware of, in the sense that, can you describe the component of your mortgage payment in the beginning of the term versus like as you move along the term between interest and principal, and how that changes, and how, again, people always say time in the market, time in a mortgage, it's beneficial to have, that longer holding period, because then at some point you're going to start paying more principal than interest as your loan amortizes. Can you describe how that's set up?
Yeah, amortization schedules are pretty complicated, and we can print out one for each and every scenario, situation, the rate, the term, obviously, and the loan amount. And then you can see a gradual, as you described, you're going to see a gradual improvement ever so slightly, even from the first payment to the second payment. That second payment is going to have a fractional more amount going towards principal reduction, because you're only allowed, the lender's only allowed to charge you interest on the outstanding balance. So assuming you follow the payment plan exactly to schedule, it's going to have a natural course of paying itself down and gaining a little bit of ground each month with a little more principal reduction. If you accelerate it or make another additional payment towards principal, then you kind of throw the whole thing out and you got to start a new amortization schedule. But there's a gentle curve that starts to build momentum over the course of the years. So as you get deeper and deeper into the loan payments, more and more is starting to gain towards going towards principal reduction, and less, because of course your balance is lower, is going towards interest payment on the outstanding balance. So 15-year amortization obviously starts out pretty aggressive, because you've only got 15 years to pay that balance down. So more of it's going towards principal. But again, the same thing applies to the 30-year and the 15 years, that you've got this gradual pay down that's going to occur. And it's a gentle curve, and we could show a graph. I don't have it available to me, but that'll illustrate that perfectly.
Sure. And what are your thoughts, or is there like a general rule of thumb for when it makes sense to refinance, like what the point of inflection is? Just, if, like you said, if it's 7% today and in 3 years from now it's 6%, but then you have to restart your amortization clock. Is there like a rule of thumb for when it makes sense, or is that a case by case basis?
There's some generalities you can make. So general rule of thumb, and then really I like to drill down more case by case. What's short-term, long-term objectives? Is it worth starting over after 3 years? My general rules of thumb are that, if you're within the 3 years, restarting a new 30-year loan is not the worst thing in the world. If you're 10 years into it and you're starting over a new 30-year amortization, that's kind of painful. Okay. Or even 7 or 6 years. But you can go with a 25-year amortization. You can do a 20-year amortization. If you kind of want to pick up where you're, and I've had clients do that. They don't want to lose the time that they feel like they've gained. And so they want to keep that same amortization payoff track, if you will, in place. Other people love to take advantage of the re-stretch. So taking that smaller loan balance and stretching it back out over 30 years in and of itself will give you a better payment, even if you maintain exactly the same interest rate. So it's kind of a compounding effect that, hey, I've got this interest rate that's 0.5% better, and I'm taking a lower balance and stretching it back out over 30 years. I get an additional effect there of reduced payment because of the stretching amortization and the reduced rate.
I actually did a recast this past summer on one of our notes.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was a cool experience.
Yep.
incredibly easy. I don't
It
think
is.
you had to pay anything for it. It's just
I've done it personally, and I've helped clients with that as well.
yeah. So that's also a good tool. So sorry to interrupt and go on that tangent. So please continue with this chart.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we hit really on the highlights. Once you go out over a year, you're going to see, again, even if you have these numbers, it's still pretty significant. The savings for the first 6 months in the year, because of the better rates, are nominal. They're not as great as what you would think, because again, you're paying a bit more for the house at a higher loan amount. And so it's not as much of a savings as what you might think it is, but you've been missing out on the appreciation of the house, and you've missed on the amortization pay down that you're going to have naturally over the course of that period of time. So back to your original point, Jenny, which I think is spot on. If you found the house that works for you and you're ready to go, I don't think you let the market hold yourself up. I think there's several factors that would encourage you. Again, it's not a fear of missing out kind of situation. Again, like you pointed out, which I think is a great point to be made, but there's a lot to be gained still by jumping in, and waiting for it doesn't necessarily pay off as well as you might think. Intuitively you think, oh geez, I need to wait for a better rate. But now you're waiting, you're missing out on amortization, you're missing out on appreciation, and you're also possibly putting yourself in a position where you're going to be dealing with more competition with other buyers out there as we go.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Troy. Where can people reach out to you to plug in their own personal situations and talk?
Yeah, absolutely. You're always welcome. And unfortunately, I don't have a quick little slide to pop up, but let's see. Well, let's do this. I can just bring up my website here, just troyhowell.com.
Perfect.
And if you go to me, hopefully this will work. But just call me, 303-520-6603, or email me. And it's moving slow, but here I am. So troyhowell.com. And then you've got all my information.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Troy, for
to run a scenario for you. You bet.
Perfect. Thanks everyone.
Jenny.